Okay, welcome back to Beyond Recovery. And my special guest today is a fellow Canadian from the other side of Canada, from the east side, over in Ontario there. And her name's Adriane. Adriane, thank you so much for coming on the show today. How are you?
Good. Thank you so much for having me, Matt.
Oh, my pleasure. My pleasure. So thanks for reaching out. And yeah, there are lots to talk about here. You have quite the story.
Mhm.
So as always, I like to do a little bit of an origin story, how I definitely am interested to see what, a little foreshadowing for the listeners. You've gotten into like hypnosis and helping folks getting through their own recoveries. But before we get there, roll back the clocks. What was your origin stories and what was your like origin, relationship essentially with alcohol? And just maybe just walk us up into, kind of like getting into the area of where it started turning on you. Just give us a little bit of backstory on that, please.
Yeah, of course. So I liked alcohol right when I started drinking it in high school. It was just one of
Mm,
those things. I moved back and forth from my parents' houses ever since I was really young. And I don't think I ever had a sense of self. They were very different homes.
mm,
And I had quite low self esteem. Um, and when I started drinking, so in I think it was like a bunch of things that all kind of added up to make me open to becoming an addict. Like just there were things that were chipping away at my sense of self. And um, when I first drank it in high school, I could drink the guys under the table, and that was always a badge of honor when you're young,
mm,
right? You thought that.
mhm,
Um, but even going away to college when I was 19, I ended up in the hospital sometimes with alcohol poisoning. Um, if I went to the liquor store and bought the liquor, it would be gone. I was never really a moderate drinker, but it was okay. It seemed I could justify it when I was young. Like it,
mm.
it was because then you're in college, everybody drinks and parties, and that's fine. It was just kind of hidden a little bit. Um, and I think so. I tried to move away after I was finished college. I worked at a bar, and then I moved away to Whistler, Canada or BC for a year, and I didn't ski once. I was partying.
There for everything else. Yeah.
Yeah, and I
Yeah.
had to come home because it was just going downhill, and that was when I first went into my first AA meeting when I was 24. But I wasn't ready. I went to one meeting and it was like, nah, like I'm young, I'm not ready, yeah, I've screwed up, but this doesn't have to be it. Um, I think it really started to go downhill probably when I was 24. I went back to school and moved in to a student house where one of the other people in the house was the exact same person as me, alcoholic.
Mm,
And we became codependents. And the next year had to drop out of school. We moved in together, and our day was just shaking our way to the liquor store. We'd go into the store next to the liquor store to get some shots in us so we could make it home. And then we would just drink all afternoon. And I remember one day when we were in that bathroom beside the liquor store, and it was like so sick trying to get this down, the taste of it, like everything about it. And I remember I looked at her and I said, like, when did this stop being fun?
mm,
And it was so my last year of the year that I really tried to get sober. I finally sobered up when I was 27. But when I was 26, that year was quite rough. I ended up in detox 4 times, and I went to rehab. Um, uh, Relapsed the day I came out,
mm,
um, and then a few months later, someone that I met in AA because I was starting to try, and someone that I met in AA got me into a sober living home. So I lived in sober living for 8 months.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Yeah. And I actually got suspended for smoking marijuana. Well, I relapsed a couple times on it, on alcohol there, and they're pretty strict on it, but they could see I was trying. Um, but then I got suspended for smoking marijuana with my roommate. I mean, if you ever have lived living in a sober house with a bunch of other women who are addicts, like it's not exactly a chill atmosphere.
Sure.
And I remember I had gotten yeah, this suspension for the smoking marijuana, but when I was out of the house, I recognized, and that was about the 7 month mark, and I realized I was okay with the alcohol. You know,
Mm.
I hadn't gone really back on my own into, you know, outside of the house. But there it was kind of like, no, I'm okay. I'll go back for a couple weeks and wrap things up proper, and then I'm okay.
Nice. Oh,
Um, yeah.
and so it's been since you've gotten out of that situation, the sober living house. Since then,
Mhm.
you've been sober. Like I think you're at 9+ years, correct? Which
Yes.
is amazing.
Yes.
Congratulations.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, I white knuckled it. I mean, I went into sober living in a September, and my last drink, I relapsed a couple times before Christmas, and my last drink was actually on December 31st.
Oh,
And
nice. New
yeah, it
Year's
was
Eve.
just yeah, it was just a
Yeah.
coincidence. It was like that because
Yeah.
I snuck out December 30th and got drunk, and I knew I was going to be sick the next morning. So I
Mm.
snuck a tall boy into the sober house,
Yeah.
and they drank it in the shower and the next morning, and that was my last drink.
Wow. Yeah. There you go. Yeah.
Yeah.
Isn't it like the last drink is always like some, and I say this sarcastically, glamorous story like that, isn't it? Eh? I
Yeah.
remember mine as well. I had two of like for the next morning. I always had hair of the dog, right? And it was a couple beers, and it was like right before I hopped in my car to drive home, like to Prince George. It was an 8 hour drive because my dad had passed away. It was a celebration of life, and I had one, and I was just so disgusted with myself, and I just dumped the other one beside me, and that was it. So
Yeah.
I appreciate you sharing your final drink story. That's actually the first
Yeah.
one that's showing up on the show, but it's yeah, I can yeah, thanks for sharing that. That's interesting. That's for sure. That's a good story.
Yeah. Yeah. No problem. No problem.
Yeah,
Not that I would have ever known that it was my final, because I really
right.
had a hard time with the idea of never drinking.
Yeah, let's talk a little bit about that because that comes up a lot, and that is very challenging. I know from my own experience that was it's very intimidating when you think I
Mhm.
can never have one ever again. And that's why there's so much to do with and fill me in on how it is that like in rehab and like the sober living houses. Is it Do they try and get you to focus on that one day at a time? I know AA meetings because that's part of my experience, but is it this kind of same thing, like focus on what you can control today, what the moment that you're in? Is it more, what did that look like for you?
Yeah, so both the rehab and the sober house are 12-step program run.
Okay, okay.
Yeah, yeah, like even the sober house, I mean, we only had staff Monday to Friday during the day, but you know, you had to go to a certain amount of meetings every week,
Mm.
and there was like the honor system in the house.
Okay, okay.
Yeah, yeah.
And just out of curiosity, do you still keep in touch with anybody out of the sober house, or was that kind of like, okay, everybody take
Yeah,
care? Yeah,
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 yeah, it
yeah.
was kind of like that. And
Fair enough, fair
there's
enough.
yeah, and
I could see that.
yeah, unfortunately, and like one of the women that I really we bonded in there and we became friends, she unfortunately relapsed like a
Mm,
while before I left and, you know, disappeared. So
ah,
by the time I had left that,
yeah,
you know, I didn't really have any ties. Yeah, I was just like, okay,
yeah,
next.
yeah. Exactly. What's next? What's next?
Yeah, yeah.
So I want to circle back to a couple of things that you talked about. So you gave a little bit of context. It sounded like, and from your description, they pretty much right away that you had this like insatiable craving for alcohol. Like it was this,
Mhm,
you identified right away that you're not necessarily a normal drinker right from the get-go. It sounds like even in high school,
mhm,
like you said, you're drinking guys under the table. So it was
mhm.
like your relationship. Did you recognize that right away? You're like, wow, I seem a little bit different here. aside from the whole badge of honor thing, did you have any thoughts like that that early on, or was it just kind of like, this is what you're supposed to do? Like you're a kid or like you're a college student. This is part of the culture. Like, what was it like that for you? Was there any kind of conflicting thoughts in your head at that time?
I honestly never saw it coming. Like I didn't
Hmm.
see it as a problem. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I just felt that, there was probably somebody in every grade or every generation of friends who could drink a lot, and
Okay.
that was
Yeah.
just me.
Yeah. And,
Yeah.
and did you have anybody that sort of modeled the behavior for you on either side of the family, or was it, did that sort of give you that idea as well? Or was that the fact that you didn't have that in the family that you're like, oh, I guess this is I'm that person?
Yeah. I mean, my sister drank quite a bit. Like she was a couple years older than me. But I mean, my mom's households, like barely any drinking,
Oh,
very quite straight edge.
okay.
Um, whether or not that attributed to my rebellion, I'm not sure, but
Yeah. Interesting to think.
yeah, yeah. And
Yeah.
like my dad drank, but it wasn't like I really saw him drunk a lot or anything,
Mm,
it was around, but um, yeah, I don't think so. I honestly think that the being sheltered
mm.
um, was more influential on my behavior than being exposed to it.
That makes sense. So
Yeah.
sheltered. So would that be, was it like sort of like, I think you touched on it a bit. Like, is it a combination of maybe some rebellion with some boredom, like the sheltered being like, okay, well, I'm going to make my own excitement. Like, is there a degree of that, or, looking
It
back
was
on it now?
just seemed that there was I I think there was more rules there seemed to be in the household than other kids
Hmm.
had.
Oh, okay.
And um I didn't feel like my own person. Like I wasn't given the space to grow up, and boyfriends were kind of frowned upon, like all those things
Hmm.
with like trying to
Okay.
protect.
Yeah.
um and I abided until I didn't.
Gotcha. Gotcha. Makes sense. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay. No, that
yeah.
paints the picture for sure. So
Mhm,
let's get into the actual, the nuts and bolts of your
mhm,
sobriety, specifically the early days. Like,
mhm,
so we're 9 years in. So let's even just take that first stage, whether it's like the first year to first 3 years, call it.
mhm.
What was that like? Like, was it, as far as like we're talking on an emotional level, physical level, sort of finding your way, rediscovering who you are? Had you even known who you were to begin with? What did that look like for you?
Yeah, so I though I left the alcohol, and somewhere in that first year, I mean, I am fortunate enough that even though I couldn't have seen my life without it, that now at some point something clicked in my mind, and now and for a long time I've been able to serve it and have it in my fridge. I can be around it. It's just not something that I want to put in my body. Um, but so when I left the sober house, I really felt that. Um, and when I went to I moved to Calgary for a year because there wasn't really many jobs around, and I wanted kind of a fresh start. Um, I was still really insecure, and it was like for a long time, I felt that even though I didn't have the obsession or the craving for alcohol, that the alcohol was taken away, but whatever was driving the drinking was still there. Like
Mm,
my insecurity, I ended up, I was a bit of a compulsive exerciser. Um, I would restrict my food, um, different behaviors where it was like the why the drinking was there. It just transferred to a different addiction.
right. Right.
Okay.
So when you start picking up on that, as far as, yes, so now you're using, like you say, compulsive exercise, different
Mhm.
behaviors that you're limiting yourself with. When
Yeah.
was the stage where you finally identified like what is behind the addiction, as far as like what is the malady or the missing ingredient as far as your personality or the work that you had to do with
Yeah.
specifically, like how did that come about? And was it like, I guess a multi-point question to that subject, was it like through, was there some counseling, was like, were you doing some books, like reading some books or that kind of thing? Like
Mhm.
what was like the recipe for you to find out what was behind your addiction in the first place?
Yeah. So I received this book because I ended up going to AA for about a year and a half to 2 years after I left the sober house. Um, but somewhere in that time, someone gave me a book, Eckhart Tolle book.
Mm, love it.
It was A New Earth,
Yeah.
and I had never read a book like that. The whole more understanding of the ego and just really what drives our behavior and what's going on in the mind, our attachment to things. And I remember it was just a book that came to me at the right time. You could read something 10 times, but then for some reason, or you can hear something 10 times and someone says it in the right time, and you absorb it. And I that book got me on a more spiritual path.
Mm,
And I do believe that where I went from there gave a hand in me not utilizing AA anymore.
okay.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because I also came to this point where I knew I didn't need the alcohol, and I didn't want to identify as an alcoholic, or I didn't want to talk about it, as being
Yeah.
a problem.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that makes sense. That is anything Eckhart Tolle is amazing. And he's an
Yeah. Yeah.
interesting speaker too. If you ever listen to his audiobook, his voice is so like soothing. I don't know if you've ever listened to him talk, but he's got a very much
Yeah.
voice like this. It's
Yeah.
like,
Yeah. Yeah. For
yeah, right.
sure.
And but yeah, no, that's amazing. That's actually a good segue into, let's start talking about what you got into after that. So was that sort of a gateway, that being the Eckhart Tolle book, into the work that you're doing nowadays? I may, forgive me if I'm jumping ahead a little bit, but it seems like a good
No,
natural
that's
segue
okay.
into, yeah.
That was a segue into um, me just finding deeper meaning in my life, I guess, as a
Mm,
whole, like, and understanding that my reactions to the world around me aren't like I can control this, right? And like
yeah.
this is, if I'm the way that we tend to become a victim of our environment,
Yep.
in the smallest ways. We're just, our
Right.
ego is so petty.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
but I think that, so, um, let's see, I was opened up to doing a couple of plant medicine retreats
Mm,
in the last few years. And I know that just the starting on the spiritual journey, that was just another level of, okay, maybe there's something else that needs to be opened up
mm,
inside. And I did a little bit of EMDR therapy. I was trying that. That wasn't very effective for me, and I actually ended up doing ayahuasca um, while I was seeing that therapist. And then when
mm.
I came back from the retreat, I was like, I think I shot myself forward a few sessions. So
Yeah. 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 Right. I can only imagine.
the
Yeah.
Peruvian jungle kind of like, opened my mind a little bit. Um,
Yeah. No kidding.
yeah,
That's
but
amazing.
I started a meditation practice and a yoga practice, and there have just been a few things over the last years, like taking different programs on like Mind Valley platform and things like
Yeah. Love
that.
Mind Valley.
Yeah, yeah. So, but I have to be honest, like even though I have 9 years or over 9 years of sobriety, I don't think that I have really had as much mental sobriety as I have in the last two, 2.5.
Hmm.
Um,
Interesting.
yeah, I I always had this not enough feeling.
Mm.
So I'm trying to, change myself and be who I think others wanted me to be, or, um, yeah, I still had a lot of internal sadness for a long
Mm.
time. Because I mean, we know the drinking or the whatever the behavior is just the symptom,
Mhm.
and I was very fortunate to have the obsession of it taken away to where I can be around it and it's absolutely zero problem. But I was also focusing my dysfunctional attention on other things,
Mm.
you
It's well
know.
put. Yeah.
Yeah,
It's,
yeah.
it's,
And I did see some counseling here and there. I didn't find it very effective for me,
mm.
but I know that some have great relationships with their counselors and they do find that very effective. Um, but I ended up doing some developmental support work for about 6 years. And while I was doing that, I knew I wanted to be doing more. Like, I had gone through this recovery journey, or I was going through it. And um, about 2 years ago, I discovered hypnotherapy.
Cool.
And it was honestly through going through the schooling and reading books um, that released my mind more than it had been before. And I was like, wow, this is changing people.
And I imagine that you helping change other people is also helping you in a sense, right? As often is the case when you see a transformation in somebody else, it helps with your personal transformation, right? Like there's the whole, it's like I think you retain 30% of what you learn, but you retain 80% when you teach it. It just brings it up to like this extra level. Have you been finding that since you've been using that in your own practice?
Yeah, like I really find that, well, I find that working with people, because the method that I use can be used for a variety of things, but I find that
Mm,
working with people who are having trouble with alcohol, I just easily do really well with them and their and what they bring to the table. Like, it's
mm,
like it resonates with me, but I'm not attached to it. I can understand it,
mm.
but I'm not immersed in it. And to see a transformation, knowing what pain they could be in, is really, like, that makes me feel really good. Like, because I've
Yeah.
been there, I know that pain, right?
Right. Yeah, you've had
And
that experience in your own life, so it's as a result, it just has so much more depth, I imagine. The
yeah,
fact that you've experientially gone through it, and then so
yeah,
you can kinda like you almost have this spidey sense as far as, okay, I can see what this person you almost yeah, it may make sense. It's like when you're in those meetings, you just have this like I found anyways, my guard just dropped and I felt like safe enough that I could be my authentic person, whether I was in a
mhm,
good mood or bad mood. I could drop as we're saying, the persona or the ego, right? And just you feel safe to truly be yourself.
for
And so
sure.
I imagine that's what happens with you because you can like people because of again, you had experience with it in your life.
Yeah.
So
And I feel that people who also are going through that, and this was my experience, I liked to talk to the people who had been through it too.
mm,
So I think that I'm giving that client a gift as well, because there's more, like, they know I'm not going to judge them in any way, right? Like,
totally.
you tell me anything and I'm like, right? There's
Yeah.
no surprises.
Yeah, exactly. One thing that I like that I especially enjoyed doing these interviews, and I imagine it comes up for you as well, is like when you can say something that you're ashamed of, and the other person sitting across from you, like, "Hey, been there, done that. In fact, I can one up you." And then all of a sudden it adds some humor to it. And you can have this release
Yeah.
of shame and add some
Yeah.
humor. I just love that.
Yeah, for sure. You're like,
It's such
what? That was like a
yeah,
regular Tuesday morning.
exactly. Yeah, yeah. I did that like 5 times a week. What are you ashamed about? Right.
Yeah.
And it's like, I don't know, it just allows you to like, cause shame is such a powerful, stagnant energy, isn't it? And it just to be able to like release that with some humor, you're either going to like release it with some tears or you're going to release it with some laughter. And of course, I mean, either way is incredibly effective, but laughter's let's face it, much funner for the most part.
Absolutely.
I'd
Yeah. Yeah.
I want to go back to you. I'm interested with the plant medicines. Like I
Yes.
just did a week ceremony with like bufo, which is like the venom of a toad. It's like a really potent DMT.
Oh, okay.
And so how is it for like, because I've always wanted to do ayahuasca, and I
Mhm.
know obviously asking you to, surmise this amazing life altering trip in our
Mhm.
journey, rather, in like a, a couple sentences. But what were like some of your main takeaways? Like, because for me, it was like, man, I experienced the energy in my body, the shift in my body.
Mhm.
And it's like something you can't necessarily explain, but there's a very much a change in like the way that you perceive life and your own life and people around you and everything
Mhm.
of that nature. What were your, Mount Rushmore takeaways of your ayahuasca journey?
Yeah. So I think like the one thing, the first night, because there was 3 ceremonies. The first night I experienced something I believe that everybody should experience, and that
Mm,
is um the self without the ego.
mm,
Just being there with literally no chatter or judgment or anything. That voice being completely switched off in your head
mm.
for hours. And I thought that was really, and I was just lying in this really awkward position that I would probably never lie in, but it was so comfortable.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
just like, and just having that experience. And it was just like, wow, that is possible. That freedom, that was just a really freeing feeling of not caring about, like, genuinely, right?
Mm.
Um, and yeah, because I think we're just so used to having that voice in our head all the time.
Oh yeah.
Um, that like that experience was really cool. And so then the second night was the real deep stuff. Like there was lots of laughing, but also lots of tears.
Mm.
It was a higher dose than the night before.
Yeah.
And I had this amazing experience of really appreciating my sense of humor and
Oh,
seeing how awesome that was in myself.
nice.
And yeah, so that was a really connecting part, because that's something and that I've learned you can't be taught, right?
Right.
Like, you
Right.
can't, there's so many things of ourselves that we can question. Well, is that something I learned? Do I think that because of someone else's experience? Like, what parts of me are because of my environment and what parts of me are me?
Or yes, I know
It's
what you
hard
mean.
to tell. And I had this
Sure.
experience of this like deep appreciation for that. Um, and then the last night I'm sometimes I over it's like too much of a good thing, right? So I said
Mm.
I would do more than the second night, and I thought I was gonna die.
Oh, okay. See, you like to kind of cross that threshold, don't you? Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. It was a
Yeah.
night of
Yeah.
just absolutely being convinced that this was the end.
Okay. That one doesn't sound as good. Well, I'll take night. Let's go back to night two. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, night two.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
was like, okay.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, but even that experience though, that was a real that was a really interesting, just for me, like thinking that more is better, right?
Sure.
And
Yeah.
then
Yeah.
Mother Ayahuasca saying,
Yeah.
absolutely not. I'm
Yeah.
gonna
Yeah.
teach you a
I'll
really
show
good
you.
lesson.
Yeah, exactly. If you haven't learned your lesson, I'll show you one more time. How about that? Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, that's amazing. That's cool. Thanks
Hmm.
for sharing that. So yeah, let's get into we'll go back to, present day here. So you got your you went to school for hypnotherapy,
Yep.
and you've been applying it specifically to those in recovery from alcohol.
Yes.
And let's say from what I gather, it's fairly recent, like you're in your rookie year, like you just started at
Hmm.
the beginning of this year, right? So
Yeah.
yeah, tell the folks listening there, like, what that looks like. Is it something you could do? Is it only in person? Are you able to do it Zoom? Like, give us the nuts and bolts of your business, please.
Yeah. So I do it all over Zoom. And what's interesting is, see, I'm not only marketing about like who I'm assisting, but I'm also trying to educate more about what hypnotherapy, or the method that I use, is. Because when we
Mm,
think of hypnotherapy, we think of being put into a trance and given suggestions, right?
right, right.
But this is not that at all. It's only hypnotherapy to the extent that, we're utilizing the subconscious mind,
Mm,
because the subconscious mind is where our problems are.
right.
And that is also where our solutions are. So
Mm,
when I sit there, when we have a session, the client is fully awake and we're talking. It sounds like a casual conversation. But when we talk about it, when we dig into the problem, clients give a lot of conscious information and a little bit of subconscious. And where the
mm,
subconscious information is that comes out, that is the key to bringing that forward into the conscious mind. Because when the information from the subconscious comes into the conscious, it doesn't make sense. Our problems don't make sense. You know, you'll bring it forward
wow.
and you're like, what?
Yeah, yeah.
Doesn't
Okay.
work. Like that reality doesn't
Interesting.
work,
Yeah,
right?
okay,
And
okay.
then the
Hmm.
reality collapses, and then the mind then has availability to all the other beautiful resources that you've learned throughout your whole life. Like, because we know the right and wrong of things and a lot of logical things, right, as adults. But these things can't get into the problem because our problems are really tight thought loops.
Hmm.
And part of the thought loop, a big part, is in the subconscious mind. So we just have to break that thought loop so that you can be opened up to all these other great things that actually make sense.
Wow. That
Yeah.
sounds incredible. So,
Yeah.
and is it true that like, so the conscious mind, because I heard some analogy that I really liked, or comparison was like the conscious mind is like the yappy little dog that does all this, like the, the, like you mentioned, this chatter that seems endless in your head. And meanwhile,
Mhm.
the subconscious is like the 95% otherwise that's like in the
Yeah.
background that you don't really pay attention to, but
Yeah.
it's so I guess it would be like, the tip of the iceberg is the conscious mind. And then there's this massive subconscious mind. Is that,
Yeah.
is that a good analogy, or is it kind of 50-50, or like, what
No,
is
it's
oh, is it? Okay.
yeah, it definitely is. So it's our lives are 5% conscious,
5%.
and yeah, and 95% subconscious. And
That is crazy.
our lives were programmed, our subconscious was programmed between the ages of 0 and 7. So you
Okay.
can imagine why we have problems as adults,
Man.
because many of the beliefs that we made age appropriately when we were young
Yeah.
don't make sense anymore. So then that
100%.
creates problems in our conscious life.
Man.
Yeah.
That's like, yeah, that's
Yeah.
mind blowing, really, right? Isn't it? That
Yeah.
your entire life is dictated by, so if you could have the picture of a great childhood, and then just one traumatic thing that just, life happens
Yeah.
at age 5,
Yeah.
and that just throws off the rest of your life in a sense, until you can basically, like you're mentioning, kind of pull that yeah, well, I guess, how would you describe that process? You're, because I like how you worded it. I'd like to maybe, yeah, repeat it, because you mentioned it's like, so basically your conscious mind has this, like these feedback loops, essentially these thought loops, or is it the subconscious? And
So
then
the
you're pulling
thought
that
loops go from conscious to unconscious.
from
So
conscious to
like, because we
unconscious.
know part of it, right? We have a
Okay.
problem and we're acting on it,
Yeah.
but we
Okay. Okay.
can't get the other half of what it's really doing for us.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah.
That makes sense. That makes sense.
Yeah. So that's stuck in the subconscious.
So what does it look like? So you have, like, say it's an hour call. It
Mhm.
sounds like there's a lot of, yeah, just like sharing, getting the person to come out. You're doing a lot of active listening, I imagine,
Yeah.
because you're hearing all the, like you
Absolutely.
say, like the facts and everything, and the person's going to tell you the details and the,
Yeah.
their truth. But meanwhile,
Yeah.
you're looking for, like little hints of what. So that, what would that sound like? Like, how would you know that, oh, that's the subconscious, or is it like something that you're kind of like picturing in the background, or how does that show up where you're like, ah, that's the path to go down with this person? How do you
Yeah.
figure that out?
So it's different for everybody, but for somebody it could be a slight change of tone and voice. They could look down
Mm,
for a second. They could
yeah.
mention something really subtly and then go, but blah 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 blah, and keep talking consciously, and you want to go back there.
Oh,
You know, there's
okay.
there's different ways that people show their subconscious information. Um, yeah, but once you bring their attention to it, is where that's where the healing is. So you want to bring their attention to it and magnify it.
Yeah. Okay. So I have an example. So I have a coach that pointed something out to me. And so, like, the example was, I was saying something and I brought up my dad. And I was like, my dad, blah, blah. And I said something kind of like, yeah, but he did the best he could. And I kept going on, and he let me talk for like another 5 minutes. He's like, so you mentioned your dad like 5 minutes ago. I'm like, yeah. And to me, it was just like a throwaway phrase. Right.
Mhm.
And then that's what ended up being like just opening up this huge thing. And then we've been pursuing that ever since. So sounds
Yeah.
kind of similar to that, right? Where he just kind of picked
Yeah.
up on, and I think probably what it was is like you say, I think it's a lot of, from what I'm gathering from what you're saying, I imagine it's a lot of like reading body language
For
as like,
sure.
right. And
Yeah.
it's interesting too. What is it? There's like in communication, it's like 7% verbal or something. I'm going to butcher this, but 7%
Yeah.
verbal, like 40% body language or something like that. Is that true?
Yeah. I think it's even more with the
Is
body
it?
language.
That's
Yeah.
crazy, eh?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. It's pretty
Yeah.
high. I don't know the percentages right now either, but yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. It's high.
Yeah. Yeah. It's high.
So when you, okay, interesting. So when you're doing these sessions, and specifically like what you had to learn, I imagine was a lot of like just watching people. It's like getting the reps in. It's like going to the gym essentially, right?
Mhm.
Putting yourself in this position where you can monitor people. Cause you say like everybody's got a nuanced behavior or way of speaking that you really got to make sure you're 100% present and watching them, I would assume, eh?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And so, I
Yeah.
mean, some people are really conscious. So you might have an hour and look waiting for a moment and it just hasn't shown up yet.
Really?
Yeah,
Okay.
I don't put time limits on my sessions
That's
because we want
smart.
to get to where we want to get, right?
Right. You
That's
don't
the
want to be
point
like,
of the
okay,
session. Yeah.
you got it. Come
Okay,
on,
well,
give me
we're
something. Yeah.
almost there. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. In the next 5 minutes, no pressure. Just, open up. Yeah.
Just open up. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. But
Right.
it's quite amazing, like the change that can happen very quickly when we tap into, where the problem is.
I can imagine. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so I would assume like with your line of work, you would want to like, how does it look as far as like, do you encourage, 6 months, a year? Cause it's not like it's something you're just going to do one off, right? You're going to want, because the first one is almost like getting to know the problem. And then you're going to do some deep work on that. Like, is it like like 3, 6, 12-month programs that you do? Or is it again, sort of dependent on the person? Like, what do you recommend when you're getting into this deep of work that you do?
Yeah. So surprisingly, I sell a package of up to 3 sessions.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
it's like a trilogy. Let's any good movie series, Star Wars, the first Star Wars, of course, trilogy, right? So yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Or the
And some
ayahuasca.
people
Yeah.
might only need 2.
Interesting.
Yeah, it just depends on how quickly the information comes out.
Yeah. Okay.
Um, yeah, it's very different for everybody, for
So
sure.
when you do get that the jackpot or that connection point with the subconscious and all that, is it just like a
Mhm.
tap? Like at that point, it just as soon as you've nailed it, or again, is it sort of dependent on the person? Do you find people like really want to hold on to that? Like, is there a bit of resistance, or is it like when you found it, it's game over? Game over is probably not the best term, but you know what I mean.
Yeah, well, see, we encourage that when someone comes to address their problem, like you have to be ready, right?
Sure.
And
Yeah.
especially with the alcohol, like you have to be doing it for yourself and really wanting to let it go.
Mm,
Because then you're already have that willingness because there
right.
is a reason it's there, right? Your mind is receiving a payoff. But then when you get to that point in a session of understanding what it's doing, you're ready to let it go because you're already consciously there.
Yeah, that makes
And then
sense.
you're just kind of like the momentum of going through the process.
Yeah.
Um, but it's really never what we think it is of why we are the way we are.
Really.
Yeah.
And that's why the subconscious is so powerful, right? Because it's
Mhm.
like you say, the logical mind is trying to figure it out, and it has like maybe yeah, that's interesting. That's really
Mhm.
fascinating that it's
Yeah,
like,
because
yeah.
we can say like I'm this way because this happened, right?
Hmm.
But I mean, when we look at, let's say, people who come out of a war, like let's say with PTSD,
Hmm.
right? For a lot of them, it's not the war that caused the PTSD.
Mm,
It's the war that triggered it, but it would
interesting.
be it's something that happened before.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow. That's
Mm.
fascinating. That's the first time
Yeah.
I've heard that before.
Yeah.
Wow. So
Yeah.
that is it. Is it safe to say that everything comes from these childhood traumas of like 0 to 7? So you're saying by that logic, somebody that went through, yeah, like some war times,
Mhm,
had that in their body, had that in their subconscious from say age
mhm,
5, and it
mhm,
just so happened to be extremely expedited by the circumstance of being in the war. But
mhm.
something else would have set it off, whether it was a dying parent or some other kind of trauma would have hit that at some point in their life. Is that kind of, is
Yeah, a
yeah,
difficult household to where,
sure.
many people might go into the military because the home life isn't great,
Yeah, that makes,
and
yeah.
this is structure and this is, you know, um, I mean, even when we think about, um, if there was a large like bus accident, not everybody there is going to have PTSD,
Oh,
right?
wow. Okay. Yeah, I guess that makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah. So so I mean, I don't know if there's extenuating circumstances, but I mean, majority of why we of the problems that we have now are because of these outdated beliefs that we
Yeah.
yeah,
Right. And
yeah.
so what are the other things that you could do in like in post, post session care? Like if after these folks have seen you, for the say the 2 or 3 sessions or whatever it may be, how does the work continue as far as integrating this new because let's face it, it's like you have like say 20, 30 years of this belief system, these programs you've been running, this persona that you've been
Mhm,
holding up, and two
mhm.
sessions in after, and yes, you've done the work and you've tapped into it. What kind of things can you do after that to make sure that you're properly integrating this new knowledge and not just
Mhm.
going back to your old patterns? How does that look?
For sure. So there is what we call like a processing period.
Hmm.
So it's the subconscious processing. So um, I encourage the client, like, don't think about the session because then the conscious mind gets involved, right? The
Oh,
conscious mind starts to make conclusions about what is supposed to
yeah.
happen and what could be.
Yeah, makes sense.
So you want to allow, like I've found that sessions that I've had on me, I've found a change, like a new thing, something a couple weeks later, because it's almost
Mm,
like things just processing in the subconscious mind
right.
to work with what's going on outside. Um, and someone will find that, um, like, there may be new things that come up that you enjoy doing. Like, I would just worked with someone and she had always thought about exercising, right? Like, she should be exercising. She wants to do things that are healthy for her. Um, but then that week after, she was just wanting to do it and she was just doing it.
Cool.
It was just
Cool.
easy. Because
Yeah.
she
Isn't
because it
that
was something that
man,
like
man. The mind is like the human brain, the mind is just is crazy, isn't it?
it
I
is,
this
it's
has got to be such
yeah,
rewarding work for you to like to have this knowledge now and then be able to share it and see instant transformations like that in people is just
yeah,
fascinating and rewarding. I can imagine, not beyond belief.
for sure, because problems like hold hands with other problems. So you can resolve one
Mm,
thing, but you will often find that other things are affected as well.
for
And you're
sure.
going like,
It's
"Oh,
yeah. Or it's funny you mention it. Like you focus on one, it could be even the same problem. I always view it as like a whack-a-mole. It's like some problem, but you have it contextually compartmentalized in a certain way. So you hit
mhm."
that one down, and then it's like the same energy, but it's like over here, and you're like, or
Yeah.
like it's changed. It's like the variant of like COVID. It's like now there's this variant of that like feeling. You're like,
Yeah.
man, I got to
Yeah.
do this one too, right? And
Yeah.
it's like,
Yeah.
so it's just never ending. But the thing is like, yeah, you just bring in the proper mindset. I think it's so, like to your point, is this, it all comes down to you want to change. People are coming to you because they want to change. They, whether
Yeah.
whatever the reasons may be, however far down they fell, or just the perception that they're falling, and they are ready for change, right? They're
Yeah.
coming to you for that reasons, which
Ab
is again equally rewarding. So, oh, it's fantastic
yeah.
conversation. This stuff's really fun to talk with you about.
Yeah.
I don't want to take up too much more of your time. Let's get into just if people want to follow you and find you and reach out to you as far as getting some sessions or whatnot, where can we find you online, Adriane?
Sure. So I do have a Facebook
Okay.
page. Um, and did you want me to just say that out
I can throw
or?
it in the show notes.
Okay.
And if you have, is it basically just your name? It's like Facebook, and then just search your name in Facebook, or
Yeah, let's just right here. Yeah, facebook.com/Adriane.daily.
okay, nice and easy.
Yeah, and then I also have Instagram and LinkedIn. I can I'll just give you those in the notes because there's some funny letters in there.
Oh, is there? Okay. Yeah. And you know what? You may have actually give them to me. I'll double check. If not, I'll let you know if you didn't. How about that? And then
Okay.
I'll
Okay.
include it in the links.
Sure.
Sounds great.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you know what? Other than that, very fascinating interview. I love talking about the, I get really wrapped up in the, the human brain is a fascinating thing. And I think the work you're doing is amazing. It's great that you've really found a way to take your experience, which could have been very, very negative and had a unhappy ending, and you've turned it into a happy ending, and now you're sharing it with other people and having them have a happy ending. So win-win all around. Great story.
For sure.
It's great. So I wish you all the best, and we'll definitely have you back on at some point. I always invite everybody that I have on here as a repeat guest. So if you have anything that comes up that you want to promote, or you have a whatever it may be, book or program or something that comes up, by all means hit me up, and I'd love to support you.
Okay, awesome. I just have one thing that I wanted to add was just if anybody is having a problem in their life, it is the subconscious mind that holds that problem. So many of the mainstream solutions that we look at just deal with the conscious mind. Like when we talk about our problem, that's all conscious.
Yeah.
But if you want to if there's anything, I think hypnotherapy was put on the back burner, but it provides massive change for people. So if anyone has one in their area, at home, wherever they live, if they ever want to see someone like one-on-one, if they've got a problem, I would just really look into it themselves and to consider that, because I don't think many people consider it, but yet it works with the part where the problem is.
That's great. I'm glad you summed it up. Actually, I have two quick things that came from that, because it's very well worded. That's great. That's awesome. First off, can you do it on yourself? Can you do like self hypnosis and you know what I mean? Do you know yourself well enough where you can go, okay, if I
not this style, because the subconscious cues, I wouldn't catch them with my conscious mind.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah, that makes sense.
Like,
that makes sense. Wait, yeah. No. Okay. I wasn't sure. Yeah.
You can do the hypnosis like to the degree of, listening to hypnosis tapes and receiving suggestion and that.
Yes.
Sometimes the problem with receiving suggestion though is that it's not suggestions you've come up with. So sometimes we can negate them.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah.
But like I know that's been very effective for some people for like smoking or sleeping and stuff.
Yeah,
like that.
That's right. I know exactly which ones you mean. I've used one for sleeping before. Interesting.
Yeah.
And final question that came out of what you're mentioning is like, I guess it's more of a statement, and it's worth putting it out there, because for me growing up, it was always the like Ravine, I think his name was, the guy that does the hypno suggestion for quitting smoking. Or like, it's like the trick on like in Vegas where they call somebody up and makes you think that you're in front of Keanu Reeves or whatever it is. Right. So it's just like, I like how you're getting it out there, that it's like something far more powerful. And it's almost I feel it's like too bad that it's been sort of dismissed almost, hasn't it? Like in a sense, like it's but do you feel like it's kind of is getting some momentum again? Like when you were taking it in school and learning it, do you kind of get this idea that it's getting a little more widely accepted at this point?
I think that there will still be a long way to go, because we so heavily lean on the mainstream stuff.
Sure.
But I know that the following with this method, this conversational hypnosis, I know that's getting bigger. And so I really hope so. I mean, I don't really understand why it's not mainstream. It's unfortunate that it usually isn't covered by they'll like psychotherapy will be, but hypnotherapy won't be.
Really?
Yeah.
That's too bad. Yeah.
It is, yeah, because it really does yeah, it's a solution for a lot of people. You know, I can't really make a complete blanket statement and
Sure, sure.
to like,
Yeah,
you know, say
yeah.
that, but
No,
it is. I'm hoping that that even just me and myself, that I can kind of open people's minds up more to it, right?
yeah. No,
Yeah.
and that's why I like it. I'm glad that you had that sort of that prepared statement that you have towards the end, because that's awesome. I wouldn't have even thought about that. It's like, we focus on these mainstream solutions, but that's just working on the conscious mind. So the way that you said it, that's money.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
uh that was the mic drop moment, but I'm sorry, it ended up inciting a couple more questions out of me. So, but
That's
yeah,
okay.
that was a great statement. I love that. So we'll definitely I'll paraphrase that and put it in the show notes as well. So again, Adrienne,
Okay.
thank you so
Awesome.
much for your time.
Thank
Best of luck
you.
to you, and we'll definitely
Yes.
have you back on the show at some point.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you so
Awesome.
much.
Thank you.